we're going to invite back to the program in a few seconds here our friend Peter SCHWEIZER, and also another friend, Eric Eggers, is with us. And so we have the Hunter Biden book. Pretty amazing, right? Yeah. I wonder if he's going to talk about oligarchs from Russia and Kazakhstan and Chinese nationals and the Bank of China deal and Burisma Holdings deal. I tend to doubt it. Anyway, so after the Senate runoff election, which gave the Democrats, their slim majority, and then installing, yes, even people that support marijuana legalization in the upper chamber, but putting that aside. Anyway, I literally called my bankers and I said, guys, if this is going to change, let's do an overnight offering. Now, it's called Curaleaf is how you pronounce it. It's America's largest cannabis company. Over 16 million shares on the market overnight and brought in $300 million in equity and debt sales in under 24 hours. I mean, this is serious, real business. I don't think it's good for the country. I don't think it's good for America. My own humble opinion, separate and apart from medicinal use of marijuana or whatever. But there's a bigger issue here. Now, remember, Peter writing the best-selling book, Secret Empires, and, by the way, is now currently being featured in the film Riding the Dragon, exposing the Biden family to ties to China. Remember, the Government Accountability Institute, their mission is to investigate and expose crony capitalism, misuse of taxpayer money, and other governmental corruption and malfeasance. And, by the way, they go after Republicans and they go after Democrats. Now, with that said, let's play a little bit. This is from ABC News Chattanooga about the Government Accountability Institute reporting on exposing corruption in this marijuana field. Now, why does it matter? I don't really care what some experts say that have a political agenda, or politicians see this as a huge way to tax even more and profit even more, like they profit from every single pack of cigarettes ever sold. But it gets into the belly of the beast that the societal implications for these decisions are meaningless. It's all about how much money they can take in to advance their socialist utopia. Here's that Chattanooga report.
Some top lawmakers in Washington say it's time to end the federal ban on marijuana, but it's already legal in some form or fashion in the vast majority of the country.
So how has the tide shifted so quickly? As Sinclair National correspondent Christine Frizzell reports, it could be a combination of changing public opinion and growing benefits to elected officials.
The 2020 election brought with it sweeping changes, including more states voting to legalize marijuana. 47 out of 50 states now allow for marijuana or CBD use for medical or recreational purposes, or both.
20, 40, 60.
But it turns out more acceptance has brought more opportunity.
The people that are in the position to decide who gets to sell it and what they get to sell, there's a lot of money on the line.
That money has come in the form of campaign contributions and gifts in exchange for coveted licenses to sell or grow, which in some states can go for a whopping $17 million.
And because it's a highly regulated industry, it's a highly lucrative business to pick winners and losers for these public officials.
The Government Accountability Institute's Eric Eggers helped author a brand new report that details the extent of the corruption, with multiple pay-to-play bribery schemes. In California, the FBI charged Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman for conspiring to funnel foreign contributions into political campaigns to influence marijuana licensing decisions. In Missouri, multiple FBI investigations are underway looking into close ties between lobbyists and the marijuana industry. And in Massachusetts, Fall River Mayor Giselle Correa will face a judge this month, facing 24 counts, including bribery and political corruption for
extorting hundreds of thousands of dollars from private citizens trying to set up marijuana dispensaries under state law.
Let's not forget, pot is still illegal at the federal level. But just this week, 3 top Democrats in the Senate said they'll be introducing legislation in a matter of weeks that would end the federal prohibition of marijuana. The follows a similar bill passed in the House just 2 months ago with support from both Democrats and Republicans.
A new federal law could significantly change the game in an exploding industry that it appears may be growing too fast for authorities to keep up. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
Pretty interesting. Peter Schweitzer, author of Secret Empires, and Eric Eggers is with us. He's a research director. They're both with the Government Accountability Institute. He authored the book. Eric did, Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. By the way, he published that in 2018. Welcome both of you back to the program. You know, what I notice, it's kind of laughable, Peter, because you can even look at the lottery as an example. Now, if you have these crime families and they're running the numbers, that's illegal. We can't have that. That's bad for society. But what's the lottery? It's the government, quote, monopoly on betting. We see more and more states now as a means of garnering revenue. Oh, we're going to earmark this money for education on top of all the money they're taxing us anyway. And then we find out not all the money goes to education, but usually the general fund. So between gambling, which is now expanding, now the weed industry, if you want to call it that, is expanding, and meanwhile it's a monopoly, and they'll end up making more money in government, and I'm sure sweetheart deals will happen behind the scenes, and they care not that everyone else that would do it would be considered doing something illegal.
Yeah, you're right, Sean. I mean, look, I'm one of those people who thinks legalizing marijuana is not a good thing. It has a lot of terrible consequences for our society. But I have friends who are libertarians who, believe it should be freely available. And when you talk to them, their basic attitude is, well, people should be able to grow it and to be able to use it. But what's happening in these states is not that. What's happening in these states is it's being legalized. But then the politicians, meaning most times the governors, sometimes other state cabinet officials, they get to pick and choose who is the one that's going to get the gold mine, that's going to get a limited license in a controlled market, and is going to be able to actually sell marijuana legally. And guess what? By virtue of the fact that they get to pick who gets the licenses, it's not just the state governments who are going to make money, it's actually the politicians themselves. And what Eric's done in this report, Sean, is shown from Andrew Cuomo's New York to California to the rest of the country. The people who are making the money are the politicians' family members, lobbyists connected to the politicians. They're all getting rich through this legalized scheme. And so it's not really about personal freedom. It's not about medical marijuana. It's about politicians finding yet another pocket in which they can enrich themselves.
Eric, you wrote this piece. You've done the deep dive into this. Why don't you walk us through all the intricacies of what Peter just laid out here, and how this is about money in their pocket, too?
Well, absolutely. And I think as much as the article that you referenced at the beginning of the segment, how the marijuana industry is saying, hey, now the Democrats are in charge, we stand to do very well. The reality is that we've uncovered in this report is that actually Democrats do really well as a result of the marijuana industry itself. Now, John Boehner is a notable exception. If at the federal level they do, in fact, legalize marijuana, John Boehner, because of his past several years of service lobbying on behalf of a marijuana company, stands to make up to $20 million. But he's hardly the only prominent politician who stands to cash in or who has been cashing in. In your state, Sean, of New York, Governor Cuomo, in 2017, you would have been hard-pressed to find somebody who was more against the legalization of recreational cannabis than Andrew Cuomo. Yet here we are just 2 years later, he's done a total 180. And that's one of the questions we sort of investigated in this report. Well, what changed? Over $1 million worth of campaign donations and lobbying efforts is one of the things that's changed for Andrew Cuomo. Also, he hired his chief of staff, their brother and father, work for a lobbying company that represents marijuana companies. And so I think, one of the big takeaways for us, in addition to the idea that it's just, I think, an egregious breach of the public trust that public officials have friends and family that are making money off of public policy, is the idea that when the coronavirus epidemic hit and we saw American life as we know it end in March of last year, I couldn't send my kids to school anymore. I don't know about you. I couldn't go to church anymore. But in 30 of the states that issued a stay-at-home order of one variety or another, they allowed cannabis dispensaries to stay open. So I think, when you follow the money, as Peter is so great about always reminding us to do, I think that helps explain why other basic and vital functions of American society ceased, but the pot industry stayed open.
It's an amazing story, and I go back and I use I think it's a legitimate example. If you look at, for example, the battle against organized crime over the years, what were they involved in? They were involved in drugs, prostitution, gambling, loan sharking, etc. Right, Peter? All right. So now we watch with the tobacco industry. Okay, a lot of people, a lot of lawyers got very rich with the lawsuits, and also the governments now tax these things to death. I mean, you could really trace the entire Eric Gardner situation to here's a guy. Why are police resources being used to and wasted on a guy that's selling Lucy cigarettes? That's all he's selling. Yeah. Because the crackdown is about money, and the money is if they're bringing cartons and cartons of cigarettes into a state like New York, they're not getting their cut of the action. So gambling is bad and illegal. Running the numbers is bad and illegal, but a lottery is okay. Sports betting is now going to be okay. You can't sell drugs unless the government decides they want to sell it and make a lot of money.
No, you're right, Sean. I mean, that's the inherent problem is that too many of our political leaders, and unfortunately it's people on both sides of the aisle, recognize all of this stuff as a business. I mean, one of the things we noticed in researching the cannabis industry is the promise has always been that if you legalize marijuana, it gets rid of people selling it illegally. In other words, it's going to hurt these criminal gangs who have made all this money from marijuana sales, right? Well, the problem is precisely what you said earlier. In a state like California, they tax marijuana, legally sold marijuana, so high that the criminal gangs that are selling marijuana really have not seen a change in their business. In fact, they're doing better because it's now legal to possess it. You're not going to get thrown into jail, but the price of the legally sold one is so high because of state taxes that these criminal gangs are not being damaged at all. They're doing quite well. And so this, I think, is one of the most important things that all Americans need to consider. I think particularly conservatives, when you're looking at any kind of policy issue, that is, look at what is the incentive structure for our politicians and for the political class, meaning lobbyists and aides and family members. And what you're usually going to find is they're going to follow what's in their financial interest, not what's in great public policy interest for us. And the marijuana industry is just another tragic example of that. And if we go ahead and do it on the federal level, which it looks like we may very well do, given the configuration on Capitol Hill, you are going to have yet another round of individuals who are going to get rich among the political class. And this widely touted promise that it's going to throw the illegal drug dealers and the criminal gangs out of business is simply not going to happen. It's actually going to make things more profitable for them because now their customers are not going to be charged with possessing their products.
Unbelievable report, and I hope people pay attention. It just exposes an underbelly. How do all these politicians go into public service and they go in with no money and they come out rich? Peter, thank you. Eric, thank you. 800-941-SEAN. You want to be a part of the program. Now, this